The scent of lemon wax clung to my hands like a confession I couldn't wash off. Each slow circle of the cloth reflected my face on the oak table, a face that didn't belong here, a name that shouldn't exist. Outside, thunder stitched the sky. Inside, Bodrov Manor held its breath. I wasn't meant to be in the dining hall tonight. This room belonged to senior staff, but Mrs. Varlenko had called in sick. "You're quiet, Natalie," the housekeeper had said. "You won't touch what you shouldn't." 3 months in this mansion, and there were still doors I'd never opened, corners where silence had a pulse. 8 steps down the corridor. Pause. 8 back. The guard's rhythm kept time with my heartbeat. I'd memorized it. My safety depended on the pattern. Then the pattern broke. The doors breathed open, soundless. 2 men dragged a third between them, blood smearing the marble. And behind them came Igor Bodrov, collar open, eyes sharp enough to slice through the dark. He didn't shout. He never needed to. "Who did this?" No one answered. Even the chandelier seemed to hum in fear. I saw the tattoo on the victim's wrist, a black circle with an M. My throat locked. My father's killer had worn the same mark. The words slipped out before I could stop them. "He wasn't beaten," I said quietly. "He was interrogated." The room froze. Igor turned slowly toward me. "What did you say?" He came closer, movements deliberate, predatory. His presence pulled the air out of the room. "How would a maid know that?" I couldn't answer. My fingers clenched around the rag. A radio crackled. "Boss, Anton Mirov's on the line. Says it's urgent." Igor's jaw flexed. "Later." "Sir," I said later. He looked at me again, unreadable, then, "Everyone out." Boots shuffled away. The door clicked shut. Only the storm remained. "Not you." He rested one hand on the polished wood. "We're not finished." The cloth slipped from my fingers, landing in the blood I'd tried to ignore. He studied me like a man dissecting a lie. "Your name is Natalie?" "Yes, sir." "How long have you been here?" 3 months. "And before that?" "Different homes, cleaning jobs." He tilted his head. "And before that?" I hesitated. "University, accounting." One brow lifted. "An accountant scrubbing floors." "A job's a job." His half-smile didn't reach his eyes. "People like you don't end up here by accident." He circled the table, slow, assessing. "Look at me." I turned. "What did you see when you looked at that man?" I said nothing. My pulse answered for me. He leaned closer. "You know what that tattoo means." The truth burned behind my ribs. The doors burst open again. "Boss, breach at the south gate. They left something." Igor didn't blink. "Show me." He buttoned his jacket, started for the door, then paused. "Clean this up. And, Natalie, don't leave this room until I return." He was gone. I stood among the echoes, the air thick with wax and blood. The chandelier's glow fractured across the table, my reflection gone, replaced by the stain. I bent to wipe it, but the rag came away dark. Pointless. So I dropped it and straightened. They thought I was just a maid. But that M on the man's wrist had been carved into my life years before Igor Bodrov ever knew my name. If I wanted to survive, I had to admit why I'd really come here. People think hiding means running. It doesn't. Real hiding is standing still until no one notices you're breathing. 2 years ago, my name was Natalie Dumont. My father, Marcel Dumont, worked for Thorn International Bank, a place where rich men buried their sins. He used to joke, "Money talks, sweetheart, but it never testifies." Then he disappeared. A call came from a blocked number. "You'll find his car at the pier. Don't call the police." I did. They found the car, still running. My father's blood on the door. They called it suicide. I called it murder. The whispers that followed carried one name, Bodrov. At first, it meant nothing. Then I learned the truth. The Bodrov Empire wasn't built on crime. It organized it. And my father had handled one account too many. He'd uncovered an internal theft. Millions missing through a shell company named Vetra Holdings. He confronted the wrong man, Anton Mirov, Bodrov's right hand. Mirov had him silenced. I had proof. Bank records, emails, transfers, all copied onto a flash drive hidden in the spine of a book called The History of St. Petersburg Furniture Design. But evidence is worthless without access. To take Mirov down, I needed to get close to his boss, close to Igor Bodrov. So I erased myself, sold everything, changed my hair, my accent, my name. Then I applied for the one position no one ever questions, a maid. The interview was short. You clean fast? Yes. You talk much? No. And just like that, Natalie Chauvel was hired. The mansion was a world of routines and rules. Breakfast at 8, engines at 9, doors locked at midnight, guards everywhere, portraits watching. Even the silence felt monitored. I learned the safe zones, laundry, service corridor, East Hall storage. The main floor was a stage of power and polish. I kept my head down and waited. Until tonight. When Igor walked in with that bleeding man, the past walked in too. That tattoo was Mirov's signature. If the victim was one of his men, it meant a war was brewing inside Bodrov's empire, and I was standing in the middle of it. I leaned against the wall, the rag dangling from my hand. The camera above the door blinked red. He was watching me. He wanted to see how I handled blood and silence. So I cleaned. Slow, steady, invisible. Just another maid erasing evidence. But as I moved around the table, a flash of paper caught the light. A blood-soaked scrap. Near the chair leg, I picked it up. Bank numbers, and one familiar name. Vetra Holdings. The breath left me. This wasn't a random beating. It was a message. The doors opened again. Igor returned, rein on his collar, eyes colder than before. Good, he said, glancing at the clean floor. I nodded. Is he alive? For now. He stopped in front of me. Tell me something, Natalie. What makes a man betray his boss? I wouldn't know, sir. He smiled slightly. I think you do. He turned toward the door but paused. Tomorrow, you clean the East Wing. Make sure it's spotless. The East Wing. His private wing. I watched him go, his reflection fading in the window until only the storm remained. Somewhere between the thunder and the whisper of his steps, I realized my plan was no longer about hiding. It was about surviving the moment Igor Bodrov learned who I really was. Because once Igor Bodrov asked, who did this? He didn't stop until he had an answer. And I wasn't sure if I was the answer or the next question. Subscribe. If you haven't already, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow's story unfolds darker, deeper, and far more dangerous than you think. Now, let's begin the tale. The next morning, the manor was too quiet. Silence in Bodrov Manor wasn't peace, it was surveillance wearing perfume. From my window in the servants' quarters, I could see Igor's black convoy still parked near the gates. His men moved like smoke, whispering into earpieces, sweeping corners that didn't need cleaning. Something had shifted overnight. Something dangerous. By breakfast, every maid knew. Someone had bled on the marble. Someone was missing. And the boss had spoken to the new girl. Me. The housekeeper's orders came sharp. Natalie, you'll serve the East Wing today. Mr. Bodrov requested it personally. Requested. The word sounded like a threat wrapped in courtesy. The East Wing was his territory. Private office, study, gym, a small library. No one went there unless summoned. Even the guards walked softer around those doors. I carried the cleaning caddy down the hall, counting my breaths. The brass handles gleamed like warning signs. I knocked once. "Enter." His voice came through the thick door, calm and lethal. I stepped inside. He sat behind a mahogany desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled, reading something on his tablet. The morning light cut across his face, tracing every line carved by calculation. He didn't look up. "Lock the door." I obeyed. The sound of the latch felt louder than thunder. "You sleep well?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Liar." The word landed soft, almost amused. Then he lifted his gaze, eyes sharp enough to pin me in place. "You were in the dining hall last night. You saw things you shouldn't have, and then you said something only a professional interrogator would know." "I read books," I tried. "True crime stories. Maybe I've seen... Don't waste my time." He rose, walked around the desk, and stopped an arm's length away. "Your hands. Let me see them." I hesitated. "Now." I held them out. He studied the small scars across my knuckles, the kind you get from typing more than scrubbing. "These are not cleaner's hands." He caught my eyes again. "So tell me, Natalie Chauvel, who are you really?" Late night in my father's apartment. Papers everywhere. Numbers that didn't add up. "Do you know who Bodrov is?" I'd asked. My father had looked at me, exhausted. "If I tell you, you'll never sleep again." He wasn't wrong. The next morning, he vanished. I never slept properly after that. "I was born in Marseille," I lied. "My father was a janitor. My mother worked in a diner. I came here for work." He tilted his head slightly. "And before that?" "Nothing before that worth talking about." Igor's silence stretched until I felt it pulling the oxygen out of the room. Finally, he said, "Every ghost leaves a footprint. You've been careful. Too careful." He leaned close enough that I could feel the low heat of his breath. "If you're hiding from something, you picked the wrong house." Then he stepped back, gestured toward the side table. "Coffee." I poured it. My hands didn't shake. He noticed that too. He took a sip, then spoke almost conversationally. "My men say you keep to yourself, that you don't talk, don't ask questions, don't flirt. That's interesting." "Because I'm here to work," I said. "No, because most people hide their fear by talking. You hide yours by disappearing." His words landed like cold water. "If I find out you're lying to me," he said quietly, "I won't kill you." A pause. "I'll find out what you're protecting, and then I'll kill that." He turned back to his desk. "You may go." I left the office with lungs full of borrowed air. The hallway lights flickered. New bulbs, same dread. I walked faster, past portraits of men who'd smiled through wars, until I reached the laundry room. There, behind the humming machines, I finally exhaled. He was right. I was hiding from something. And it was standing 2 rooms away. It was still where I'd hidden it, inside a hollow behind the wardrobe panel in my quarters, wrapped in plastic, small enough to swallow, the data drive. My father's voice note was the last file on it. "If you're hearing this, Nat, it means they found out. The one you can't trust is Mirov. Don't go near Bodrov. Don't." The message cut off with a sound that still wakes me sometimes. I touched the drive like a prayer. One mistake, and Igor would have it. One search of my room, and the truth would crawl into daylight. By evening, the tension in the house had thickened. Guards patrolled in pairs again, whispering about Anton Mirov, about betrayals, about orders coming from both sides of a war that hadn't officially started. I kept my head down. The staff didn't speak to me now. Even Mrs. Varlenko avoided my eyes. Word traveled fast in a place built on secrets. Everyone knew the boss had questioned the maid. Near sunset, I was polishing the corridor mirror outside Igor's study when his right-hand man, Lev, walked in. Older, scar across his neck, voice like gravel. "He wants you again." I followed him back inside. Igor was pacing by the window, phone pressed to his ear. "No, Lev, I don't care what it costs. Find who leaked that shipment list. If it's Mirov, we move first." He ended the call, turned, and nodded to Lev. "Stay." I stood near the door, pretending to blend into the furniture. "Sir," Lev began. "The staff, one of them, she's not what she says. Her papers are clean, but too clean." Igor didn't look surprised. "You mean the maid?" Lev nodded. "You want her gone?" Igor's voice dropped to a calm that chilled. "Not yet. Check everything about her. Bank records, education, birth certificate. If she's a ghost, I want to know who buried her." Lev left. The door closed, and I realized he hadn't meant for me to hear it. Or maybe he had. That night, sleep didn't come. Rain lashed against the windows like fingernails. Every creak sounded like footsteps. I sat on the floor beside my bed, the hidden drive clutched in my palm. 24 hours. Maybe less. Once he searched, he'd find the ghost behind the maid. And when he did, the question would shift from who did this to why did she come here? A memory burned itself onto my mind the first time I ever saw his face. Not in person, but on a stolen case file photo. He was younger, clean-shaven, standing beside Anton Mirov outside a casino in Monaco. The caption read, "Bodrov Investments Limited, suspected laundering front." Back then, I thought he was the devil. Now, after standing inches from him, I wasn't sure if the devil had rules. Igor did. That made him more dangerous. The mansion clock struck midnight. A shadow passed beneath my door. I froze. Footsteps. Then a pause. A piece of paper slid under the threshold. I waited until silence returned before unfolding it. One line. No signature. "They're coming for you before morning." Outside, thunder growled like a warning. Inside, I packed the flash drive into my sleeve, pulled on my uniform, and stood at the mirror. If Igor Bodrov was going to uncover me, he'd do it face to face. Because ghosts can only hide for so long before the living start hunting them. Morning came gray and heavy, dragging the storm with it. The news in Bodrov Manor traveled faster than the rain. Someone had sent the boss a message. A real one. Not a rumor, not a whisper. A threat carved into reality. By noon, the entire household felt it. No music, no laughter. Just the sound of boots, the metallic click of guns being checked, and the faint buzz of radios that never seemed to rest. I was polishing the mirrors on the second-floor corridor when the air changed again. That same electric drop I'd felt the night Igor first looked at me like I wasn't supposed to exist. He was angry. The kind of quiet anger that moves the world in small, irreversible ways. I caught fragments of conversation as his men passed through the hall. "He got a photo this morning." "The one from last night?" "Yeah. The guy who was beaten." "Same one." "What did it say?" Something like, "You can't protect what's already inside your house." The words hit harder than they should have, because I knew exactly what that meant. Anton Mirov knew I was here. By afternoon, the mansion was on lockdown. Every door had guards. Every maid was questioned, phones confiscated. No one entered, no one left. When it was my turn, the security chief's tone was polite but surgical. "Where were you between midnight and 2 a.m.? "Sleeping." "Anyone see you?" "No." He wrote that down slowly, like he wanted to make sure I heard the scratch of every letter. "You've been with us 3 months, right? What did you do before?" "Private cleaning, hotels." He looked up, squinting. "You nervous?" I forced a smile. "Wouldn't you be?" He didn't laugh. When he let me go, I walked out too fast, my heartbeat thudding like footsteps in my ears. I needed to breathe and think. By evening, I had my first real confirmation of what I feared. In the servants' kitchen, someone had left a folded newspaper on the counter. Local, dated that morning. A single word circled in red ink across the crime column: reprisal. Underneath, a line of smaller text. Anton Mirov rumored to be consolidating control of southern territories following internal Bodrov conflict. He wasn't just warning Igor, he was calling him out. I found myself near the east corridor again, carrying a tray of fresh towels I didn't need to deliver. The hallway stretched long and dim, ending at the glass wall of Igor's office. I could see him inside, pacing behind his desk, his voice low but edged with steel. "If Anton wants a war," he said into the phone, "he'll get one." He turned away from the window, but then, almost instinctively, his gaze caught mine through the glass. For a heartbeat, everything in the world stopped. The man who terrified the city just looked at me. No mask, no command, just something quiet, searching. Then the call ended, and he was gone, the moment like a match struck and snuffed out before the flame reached air. I should have walked away, but I didn't, because every second that passed made it clearer. He didn't know I was the one they were warning him about. Not yet. That night, the storm returned. Lightning splintered the sky. The manor's walls groaned under the wind. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed, and I almost dropped the glass I was drying. I told myself to sleep, to stay quiet. But I couldn't. The message, that photograph, meant Anton had eyes inside this house. And if he had eyes here, he could find the flash drive, the one that could burn him to ash. I had to move it. I waited until the clock struck midnight. The hallway cameras blinked once, then dimmed. The 10-minute power cycle I'd memorized weeks ago. I slipped out barefoot, the hem of my uniform brushing the polished floor. The corridors smelled of rain and wood polish and fear. The archives were 3 halls down, behind the locked records door where staff files and import logs were kept. I'd overheard enough to know Igor kept backup data there. Information Anton might also want. And I needed a hiding spot no one would think to check. The lock was old. I used a thin wire from a broom bristle. A quiet click. The door gave way. Inside, rows of file cabinets loomed like soldiers in formation. I moved between them, flashlight shaking slightly in my hand. I found the far corner, a wooden cabinet labeled Imports 2017-2019. I slid open the bottom drawer, lifted the papers, and tucked the flash drive underneath the folder. "Stay here," I whispered to it. "Stay quiet." But the sound of my voice was swallowed by another noise, a soft one, behind me. Footsteps. I turned, too fast, and the flashlight beam hit him square in the chest. Igor. He stood in the doorway, half in shadow, half in the cold light spilling from the hall. His shirt was open at the collar, his expression unreadable. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. My mouth went dry. "I wanted to organize the files, the staff files." He took a step inside. "At 1 a.m? I couldn't stay away," he finished for me. He closed the door behind him. The soft click of the lock was louder than thunder. "Turn around." I did. Slowly. The flashlight beam caught the glint of something small and metallic in his hand. My flash drive. He held it between 2 fingers like a piece of evidence. Tell me what's on it, he said. My lungs forgot how to work. Natalie, he pressed, voice calm but coiled tight. What is this? I could lie. I could pretend it was nothing, but the truth sat too heavy in my throat. Proof, I whispered, of who really killed my father. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of every possible future, none of them safe. He said nothing for a long time. Then he moved closer until there was only the space of a heartbeat between us. And you brought it here, he said softly. To me. It wasn't a question. It was disbelief. I nodded once. He looked down at the flash drive, then back at me. You have no idea what you've done. His tone wasn't angry. It was something worse, something almost afraid. If Mirov sent that message, he murmured, it wasn't to threaten me. It was to warn me. He knows exactly who you are. He took a slow breath, pocketed the drive, and stepped back toward the door. You'll stay where I can see you from now on. Igor, don't. His voice softened, but only slightly. Not tonight. He opened the door and glanced over his shoulder. For what it's worth, you're not the first person to come here looking for revenge, but you might be the only one still alive to get it. Then he was gone. The moment the door closed, I sank to the floor, shaking. Through the rain-streaked window, lightning flashed, and I saw my reflection in the glass, pale, trembling, caught between guilt and survival. The storm outside was roaring now, echoing through the manor like a heartbeat. And somewhere inside, a war had already begun. The storm hadn't stopped. It just changed its rhythm, like the city itself was holding its breath. Igor didn't sleep that night. I knew because I heard his footsteps echo through the east wing until dawn. The soft thud of his shoes across marble, the creak of his office chair, the low hum of his computer booting up. Somewhere in that silence, he had plugged in the flash drive, and now everything I had buried was unearthing itself before him. When I brought him his morning coffee, he was still there, shirt sleeves rolled, jaw locked tight. His desk looked like a battlefield, papers scattered, monitors filled with scrolling data, and the flash drive glowing faintly in the port. He didn't look up. Close the door. I did. The click of it sounded final. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared at the screen. Then he exhaled, the sound heavy, controlled. You should have come to me sooner, he said at last. I stayed by the door. Would you have believed me? He turned, finally meeting my eyes. Whatever he had seen in those files, it wasn't just numbers. It was betrayal. Anton used my name, he said, voice low. My signature, my accounts. He's been moving money through offshore shells for years. Do you understand what that means? I nodded faintly. That your entire empire looks like it's yours on paper, even when it's his in practice. A bitter laugh escaped him. Exactly. He clicked through another set of documents. He built a network using my reputation as camouflage. Every transfer, every contract, mine. The man even paid someone to die under my orders. His hand froze on the mouse. Look at this. I stepped closer, scanning the screen. A date glowed in the upper corner, November 3rd, 2019. Next to it, an outgoing payment, large, recipient, private contractor, Markel Dronov. My heart seized. That was the day my father disappeared. An assassin, I whispered. He paid a killer through your own account. Igor didn't look at me, but his jaw clenched. So when your father refused to hide it, Mirov silenced him. And everyone thought you ran because your family stole from me. He pushed the chair back, rising to his full height. The light from the monitors painted his face in cold blue. Your father didn't steal from me, Natalie. He was trying to warn me. The words hit harder than I expected. For the first time since walking into this house, I saw something behind his armor. Not pity, not anger, just recognition. Two people carrying ghosts from the same war, on opposite sides. I didn't realize I was crying until he spoke again. You risked your life to bring this to me. Why? I swallowed hard. Because no one else could touch him. Mirov owns everyone. Banks, cops, judges. But you, he fears you. He studied me for a long time, then said quietly, he should. He turned back to the screen, pulling up another folder. Dozens of wire logs appeared. Proof of Anton's empire. You understand what happens next? Igor said. You'll go after him. No, he replied, voice like flint. I'll expose him, make him choke on his own trail of money. Killing him would be a mercy he doesn't deserve. Then softer. But he won't wait for that. He'll come for you. By midday, the mansion was locked down again, but differently this time. Not with suspicion, with strategy. Guards changed positions. Windows were reinforced. Lev, Igor's right hand, coordinated movements like a general preparing for siege. And through it all, Igor never raised his voice. He didn't have to. The entire house bent around his silence. I stayed in his office, organizing files he'd already read twice, too restless to sit. Every so often, I'd catch him glancing at me, never long enough to mean something, but enough to feel it. The air between us wasn't fear anymore. It was something heavier, shared purpose, or maybe shared ruin. Late evening, the rain paused just long enough for the air to turn still, unnaturally so. Igor sat at his desk, flipping through a dossier. I stood by the window, watching the reflection of the city lights dance across the wet glass. When I was younger, he said quietly, my father told me trust was a weakness, that you survive by expecting betrayal from everyone, especially those closest. I turned to face him. Was he right? He didn't answer for a moment. Then, no, but he lived long enough to make me think he was. He looked up at me, gaze softer now. And you came here for revenge. What do you want now? I hesitated. The truth. A faint smile ghosted across his face. Then we want the same thing. The storm outside rumbled again. The kind of low thunder that sounds like it's coming from underground. We didn't hear the first bullet, only the glass. A sharp crack split the room, then another. The window shattered beside my head, spraying shards across the floor. Igor moved faster than thought, grabbing me by the arm, pulling me down behind the desk as a third shot tore through the bookshelf. Stay low, he ordered, voice calm but tight. He drew his gun in one smooth motion, eyes scanning the blinds. Where's it coming from? I whispered. East Ridge, sniper angle. He reached for the security radio. Lev, window breach in my office. I want a perimeter sweep, now. Static. Then Lev's voice. Copy that. I could taste dust and adrenaline in the air. My heart slammed against my ribs like it wanted out. Igor crouched beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. His voice dropped, quieter now. You see why I said you can't leave my sight. I nodded, trembling. He pressed a hand lightly against my back, guiding me away from the broken window toward the far door. Move. We slipped into the hallway as guards thundered past. Behind us, the office light flickered in the wind, the broken glass glittering like diamonds scattered by death. In the hallway, he turned to face me, voice low. That shot wasn't meant for me. I froze. What do you mean? He looked down the corridor, eyes narrowing. He could have hit me first, but he aimed at the window beside you. My blood ran cold. Mirov knows I'm here. Igor nodded once. And now he knows you're with me. He holstered his weapon, straightened his collar. This changes everything. The rest of the night passed in silence. The guards found a rifle casing near the tree line outside the estate. Russian make, professional setup. No prints, no mistakes. Just a message. By dawn, the window had been replaced, the blood cleaned, the papers gathered. But nothing felt restored. I sat in Igor's office again, the hum of his computer filling the quiet. He was standing by the window's new glass, staring at the horizon like he could see Mirov out there. "He's making this personal now," Igor said. "It already was." He turned. "You could still walk away, Natalie. I could have a car ready within the hour." I shook my head. "If I leave, he wins." For a moment, something like respect flickered in his eyes. Maybe more. "Then stay close," he said. "And from now on, if I tell you to run, you don't ask why." I met his gaze steady. "And if I tell you I won't?" His lips curved slightly. "Then we'll both die stubborn." For the first time since stepping into Bodrov Manor, I smiled. But it didn't last. Because deep down, we both knew something neither of us said aloud. If Anton Mirov had fired once and missed, he wouldn't miss again. By morning, the glass was new and the danger old. No one said the word sniper out loud. They didn't have to. Fear has a scent, and it lingers longer than lemon wax. I was still in Igor's office when Lev arrived with a clipboard and a face that had seen worse. He stood at attention, waiting for the decision only one man could make. Igor didn't sit. He rarely did when he'd already decided. "Move Natalie into the East Wing," he said. Lev didn't flinch, but the air did. "Sir, staff quarters are on the west side. I said the East Wing." Igor's tone was calm, flat, as a drawn blade. "My floor, my hallway, my guards." Lev nodded once. "Understood." He slid the form across the desk. "I'll have her room cleared." I found my voice. "People will talk." Igor glanced over. "Let them," he replied, cold and unbothered. "It keeps you alive." Lev hid a reaction, respect or curiosity, I couldn't tell, and left to reassign the world. I exhaled, a breath I hadn't realized I was holding since the window shattered. "I can't stay in your wing." "You can," he said, "and you will. It looks like what?" He finally met my eyes. "Protection? Like possession." A corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, something sharper. "Names don't interest me. Outcomes do. Mirov missed once. He won't repeat the mistake." I looked away, out at the city through the new pane. Rain beaded and slid like seconds on a clock. "Why are you doing this?" I asked softly. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, the words sounded like they'd been chosen hours ago. "Because you brought me the truth and they tried to shoot it out of your hands." Moving happened fast. 2 housemen appeared at the servants' wing with boxes and unasked questions. My few things fit into one: a spare uniform, a worn cardigan, the history of St. Petersburg furniture design, now empty, a photo of my father with a coffee stain across the corner. We walked past portraits and cameras, up the quiet stairs to a corridor that felt nothing like the rest of the house. The east wing smelled faintly of cedar and rain. No chatter, no scuffed baseboards, no hurried footsteps. The kind of silence that is chosen, not enforced. "Here," one of the housemen said, opening a door. The room was spare but warm. A narrow bed, a window over the trees, a small desk facing a wall I could trust. A guard nodded at me from the end of the hall and returned to watching the world. I set the box on the desk and stood in the doorway, unsure if the room felt safer or smaller. Igor's voice came from behind me. If anything feels wrong, tell Lev. Or tell me. I don't want to be a problem. You are a solution, he said, and then he was gone. Days learned to drip into nights. The East Wing became a map of new routines, guards rotating like the hands of a clock, the quiet thud of Lev's boots every 2 hours, the soft chime of coded messages passing in the dark. My room was 3 doors from Igor's office, near enough to hear the tenor of his mood in the way he shut the door. We worked late, sometimes until the birds argued with dawn. He sat at the command desk. I stood or paced, decrypting Anton's web of shell companies with a patience born of rage. We spoke in facts and coordinates, in dates and decimals, in the language of men who hide in numbers and the women who hunt them there. When fatigue turned the text to water, he brought coffee I didn't ask for. When his temper flared, I slid a file across the desk instead of an argument. When our hands brushed reaching for the same page, we pretended paper was all it was. The air between us changed anyway, from wary to wired, from wired to charged. It wasn't softness, it was voltage. One night, after hours of combing through transfers, I found a sequence of payments buried under a hospital donation ledger. 3 names, 3 dates, 3 cities. On the 3rd, a withdrawal lined up with the same week my father disappeared. I pushed the screen toward him, voice steady. There, it's a corridor. He moved money before every hit. Igor's eyes flicked, then fixed. You're certain? Yes. He didn't praise. He moved. Phone to ear, voice quiet and fatal. Lev, split a team. I want eyes on these charities, and I want the boards turned inside out. Today. A pause. No, not a raid. A memo. Make them deliver the paperwork themselves. Anyone who refuses gets a visit. He hung up, gaze still on the data. He steals truth and pays for silence. We'll make the silence expensive. He caught me watching him. His expression softened into something careful. You look exhausted. So do you. We can't be both. I didn't know what to do with the warmth that left in the room. The house reacted to whispers the way a body reacts to poison, fast, full, with fever. Guards started treating my presence like a problem with a badge. Some averted their eyes with rigid respect. Others didn't. In the staff kitchen, conversation stopped when I entered and began again when I left. A plate once set for me at the corner table now appeared at the end of the counter, as if distance were disinfectant. Mrs. Varlenko crossed herself when I passed. You should leave, she muttered under her breath. Houses like this eat girls. I didn't say it out loud, but the East Wing had already answered. Not this one. The city, meanwhile, did what cities do. Watched, chewed, spat, repeated. The rumor started with a photo. A grainy shot of Igor at the east entrance, his hand at the small of my back, guiding more than touching. Someone cropped it too close, sharpened the pixels until the gesture became a claim. By afternoon, the gossip pages had their headline, Bodrov's new mistress moved into private wing. By evening, the headline had a name attached, mine. Not Chauvel, not Dumont. Just Natalie, tagged and shared beneath comments that ranged from speculative to surgical. The world prefers women to be stories it can finish for them. I found the article open on a tablet outside the security room. Lev saw me looking, closed the tab without comment, and didn't meet my eyes. Does he know? I asked. Lev's jaw worked. He knows. A pause. He doesn't care. I wasn't sure whether that was comfort or strategy. Near dusk, the house held its breath again. 2 bodies turned up at the river, faces I recognized from late-night meetings in the West Garage. Mirov's men. The message arrived before the police did. Photos to Igor's secured line, time-stamped, location stamped. The caption was short. For treason. No signature. His signature. The news cycle tore into it, all teeth. Igor Bodrov executes traitors in internal purge. War in the East, Bodrov versus Mirov. And beneath, like a rumor that wanted to become fact, who is the woman in the East Wing? By nightfall, the city knew my silhouette. By midnight, it knew my face. I turned off my phone. The silence buzzed louder without it. That night, in the office, the monitors threw a pale glow across our hands as we worked. I could hear the storm returning, a soft roll against far windows, as if the sky had been listening and finally decided to answer. Igor finished a call and set the phone down, a rare tightness around his eyes. "The photo is everywhere," he said. "I saw." I tried to keep my voice level. "It will make me a target." "You were already a target." He considered me for a long breath. "But now anyone who aims knows what they're aiming at." I folded my arms to stop the chill. "So we let them think I'm mine?" He didn't look away. "Let them. It keeps you alive." There it was again. The unblinking logic of war. Claim as shield. In any other language, it would have sounded romantic. In ours, it was a perimeter. I nodded once. "Then we use it." He studied me as if the answer had surprised him. "Use it how?" "Invite the rumor to dinner," I said. "If they think I'm a weakness, they'll circle. And when they circle, they show their faces." A rare smile, brief, unguarded, cut through the room like a light switching on. "You're not a solution," he said softly. "You're a strategy." "Don't promote me yet," I murmured. "I still make coffee." He gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit." I did. The chair was close enough that our elbows could have touched if either of us breathed too carelessly. We didn't. We worked through another hour, then another. The file tree thinned, the picture sharpened. Mirov's shadows tried to outrun the light and kept losing ground. Sometime near 2 a.m., Lev knocked once and stepped in. He handed Igor a printed still from a street camera. A black car idling, a man's profile caught in reflection, the caption stamped at the bottom. Lev tapped the photo. "Source says Mirov's looking for a cameraman, wants a shot of her." He didn't glance at me. Alone. Igor's expression didn't change, but the temperature did. "He won't get it." Lev inclined his head and left. We stared at the door after it closed. Stared and didn't move, like motion might break something delicate we were both pretending not to see. Finally, Igor spoke, voice quiet enough to feel rather than hear. "You should sleep." "So should you." He nodded toward the hallway. "I will. After I walk you back. I can manage." He didn't argue. He stood, and so did I. In the doorway, the corridor stretched long and still, the guards' silhouettes posted like punctuation. We walked in silence. At my door, I turned the handle, then hesitated. "If this gets worse," I said, "I don't want anyone hurt because of me." He leaned one shoulder against the frame, close enough for warmth, far enough for sense. "This house has been hurt for a long time," he said. "You didn't bring that here. You just made it tell the truth." He looked down the empty hall, then back at me. "Lock your door." "I will." He stepped away, then paused, as if remembering the world would see anything we forgot to hide. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. "Good night, Natalie." "Good night, Igor." I shut the door and pressed my back to it until my heartbeat slowed. Outside, the storm reached the windows, tapping like a patient guest. Inside, The city scrolled through my face and made up its mind about who I was. The boss's mistress, the girl in the East Wing, the reason 2 traitors were floating in a river. None of it was true. All of it was useful. I lay down fully clothed, the ceiling a pale square I couldn't climb out of, and finally understood what survival felt like when it wore someone else's name. Not soft, not safe, claimed. By dawn, they'd all know it. By noon, they'd repeat it. By night, they'd believe it. And when they believed it, we'd be ready. The manor dressed itself like a public lie. Crystal gleamed, silver shone, and the chandeliers threw diamonds of light across faces that preferred to be seen by the right kind of witness. Tonight was about performance. It was about reminding the city that bodies and businesses still answered to Igor Bodrov. Invitations had gone to men whose names made other men's hands shake. Importers, politicians, oligarchs, silent partners who paid for the right to remain unseen. They arrived in black cars and shorter tempers, exchanging glances that were contracts disguised as civility. I stood behind the head table in a dress I hadn't chosen. Something pale, simple, the exact kind that blurred background into wallpaper. I was told to serve, to move like a ghost that spilled drinks without leaving fingerprints. That was the safest place to be. Visible enough to be noticed in rumor, invisible enough to be touched without consequence. Igor sat at the head, a monolith in a tailored suit. The men around him leaned forward like flowers toward a fire, some out of fear, some out of calculation. His right hand, Lev, watched the room with a face carved of nothing soft. The entire house was a ring built around a man who preferred silence. The music started, strings low, a velvet hum that filled spaces between sentences. Waiters moved like choreography. Glasses clinked. Someone toasted prosperity. Someone else toasted peace. Everyday words for a war that hummed. Under the lacquered table, I kept to the shadow near his shoulder, ferrying flutes of champagne, wine decanted, plates skimmed. Conversation slid past me. Trade deals, port shipments, municipal favors, language that meant money and leverage, and people who disappeared without headlines. When my hand brushed the edge of the table, Igor's fingers tapped once, a small private punctuation that said, "Be careful." Anton Mirov's arrival was a puncture in the room's delicate membrane. He didn't come with the courtesy of a scheduled guest. He came like a rumor becoming flesh, late, with a grin carved into his face and the smell of someone who'd been drinking already. The way he moved through the crowd said he owned the air in the room. He crossed the floor with a casual salute, slow enough for everyone to watch. Men who had been pretending to laugh fell into a hush so palpable you could hear the chandeliers whisper. "Igor," he said, voice honey and threat. "I heard the house wasn't holding entertainments lately. Thought I'd check the hospitality." Igor didn't smile. "You trespass," he said. "Trespass?" Anton's grin widened. "In your house? I thought we shared certain assets." He leaned in, the kind of closeness that invited knives. "Tell me, Bodrov, who is that behind your back? The girl who cleans your messes and takes your secrets to bed?" A murmur scattered like mice. Eyes that had been polite now sharpened. Someone nudged the man beside him. Cameras, or the men who had cameras, latched onto Anton's face the way birds latch on wire. I felt cold rush across my skin. The room shrank until it felt like a box. Igor's hand went to his hip, the small movement of a man who keeps the comfort of a weapon like a habit. He cursed once, soft and precise. "My home, my rules," Igor said. He rose, the table creaking under the shift. Plates clinked. Men in the room straightened as if someone had hit a pause button and handed them the script. Anton tipped his head toward me. "It's dangerous when a boss sleeps with secrets." When he said it that way, the words weren't about desire. They were an accusation. Igor's jaw tightened. For a beat, I saw the man who could order 100 men to die without flinching. Then his fingers flexed toward the gun at his hip. I moved before I thought, an instinct older than any caution. Leaning into his space, my lips were a whisper against his ear. "Not here." He didn't look at me, but whatever comment he wanted to make died. He lowered his hand, the motion small but deliberate. Men around the table exhaled as if a storm had passed. Anton's smile stayed, vicious and pleased. The rest of the meal tasted like metal. I served salads and listened to talk that felt suddenly theatrical, anything to fill the silence Anton carved. I poured wine into a man's glass with fingers steady as a metronome. Heads turned, cameras flashed. The rumor would eat the photograph until it came out smelling like truth. Anton took a seat not far from us, acting like he belonged. He told stories of shipments and black market auctions. He drank and clapped and leaned in close to men he'd betrayed the week before. His laughter was a blade wrapped in velvet. At one point, he raised his glass and toasted, oddly genuine. "To truth," he said. "May it always be useful to those who wield it." A round of forced applauding followed. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone coughed. The music masked the small, deliberate things. Anton's fingers closed into a fist under the table. The heels of 2 men tapped as if in time with a hidden signal. After the main course, a server approached with a tray for dessert. On it lay small glasses of something thick and dark. I had to reach over Igor to set one on the table near Anton's plate. When my hand brushed the edge of his arm, a folded slip slid across the tray and fell through the gap like a puncture. It landed at my feet with a whisper. My heart where it was, behind bone, steady, stuttered. I bent, reflex, and picked it up, fingers curling around paper that had been folded too many times. No one saw. Or perhaps they did and chose not to. To be noticed was to be vulnerable. I opened it on the spot, beneath the polite lights and gilded ears. 3 words, ink scrawled quick and purposeful. "You're next." The paper stung. It smelled faintly of smoke and cheap cologne. I hid it in my palm and slipped back into the choreography of service. Plate handed, smile kept neutral, breath steady. The room rotated, oblivious. Anton watched me like a man who'd thrown a pebble and waited for the splash. His eyes found mine and held, curious, hungry. The grin was pure invitation. He liked the knowledge that he'd put a stone in my pond. He liked the idea of ripples. For a moment, I considered standing up and revealing everything, the flash drive, the proofs, the names. I could stand and shout the ledgers across the table and watch these men fold like paper under confession. But that would be the night the chandeliers turned into traps. It would be a spectacle of ruin with no idea of repair. I wouldn't burn the house to stop a single man. Not yet. Instead, I swallowed the paper and kept moving, as if my hands were not shaking at all. I replenished wine, silenced a joke that flirted too close to facts, and leaned in to catch Igor's eye. He nodded once, almost imperceptible. There was an approval in it, a recognition that the game continued and that we were playing different sides of the same board. When the dinner broke up, men left in clusters, smiles, hands, doors swinging, cameras followed. Voices outside the gates called out, eager for scraps. The rumor mill churned. Bodrov's mistress, a weak boss, a war among men. As the last guest departed and the servants began to clear china, I ducked into the kitchen to breathe. The folded paper still burned in my pocket like a coal. Lev found me there, drying his hands on a towel, watching me with a concern that had nothing to do with hospitality. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I lied. "Just tired." He nodded and didn't press. Perhaps he understood that in this house, truth had many faces, and silence often wore the kindest one. I kept the note, folded neatly, in the small bottom drawer of my dresser that night. I slept with the paper under my pillow like armor and fear in equal measure. Outside, thunder rolled like applause. Inside, the walls had heard Anton's insult, and my note and the unseen thread between them had tightened. Men who'd come to remind Igor of his power had left with a new story. The boss who moved a maid into his wing, the maid who wore his shadow, and the man who inserted a threat into the room like a nail. The night's performance had ended, but the stage had been reset. And everyone knew, under the chandeliers, the war had a new shape, one that began with glass, folded paper, and a promise that someone, somewhere, would be next. The morning after the dinner, silence settled over the Bodrov mansion like dust after an explosion, fine, heavy, and impossible to clean away. Natalie woke to the sound of drawers slamming. At first, she thought it was the storm that had haunted the night before. Then she saw it. The torn bed sheets, her wardrobe wrenched open, clothes tossed across the floor like confessions. The room had been searched, violently. Her stomach turned to stone. She dropped to her knees, pulling open the bottom drawer where she'd hidden it, the flash drive. Gone. Only the small indentation in the wood remained, the shape of a secret ripped out. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Then came the voice, the one that could shake a building without raising its pitch. "Lev!" Igor's roar cracked through the east wing like thunder finding a target. Natalie ran out, heart pounding. 2 guards were already standing at attention, faces pale as paper. Lev appeared from the far end, tablet in hand, voice low but tight. "No entry logs, boss. Whoever came in bypassed the internal system." "You're telling me someone walked into my house, through 3 layers of guards, into her room?" Igor's tone dipped, lethal. "And you have no footage?" "Not a trace." He slammed his fist into the wall. The impact made the portrait shiver. Natalie flinched, then caught his gaze. "Igor," she began. He turned sharply, eyes like steel under frost. "Don't." But his anger wasn't directed at her. It was everywhere else. She could see it in the way his hand trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. "This wasn't random," he said finally. "Someone inside helped them." Lev hesitated. "You think Mirov's men—" "No." Igor's voice was quiet now, more dangerous than the shouting. "Mirov couldn't reach this deep. This was family." The word family hung between them like a curse. By noon, the mansion was a fortress under siege. Guards searched every corridor, servants lined up for questioning, rooms sealed off. The sound of radios buzzed like insects through the air. Natalie stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the rain trace lines down the glass. Guilt gnawed at her ribs. She had brought this storm into his house. Her father's past, her secret files, her presence. When Igor entered, the room seemed to tighten around him. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled up, veins visible down his forearms. His eyes found her immediately. "You're blaming yourself," he said, not asking. "I lost the drive. It's my fault." "You didn't bring this, Natalie," he interrupted, stepping closer. "You uncovered it." His tone softened. "That drive wasn't stolen because of you. It was stolen because of what it contained." She searched his face. Then you know who did it. He exhaled through his nose. I have a name. The confrontation came in the war room, a place few outside his inner circle ever saw. The table was littered with blueprints, ledgers, and a half-drunk glass of whiskey. Igor stood at the head, facing 5 men, Lev, 2 enforcers, and Igor Bodrov, his cousin. Viktor had the kind of smirk that only money and bloodline could afford. He leaned against the table, casual, unbothered. You called me from a meeting, cousin. I assume this is important. Igor's gaze didn't waver. You've been helping Mirov. A quiet chuckle. That's a heavy word. Helping. He accessed internal systems through your accounts. Viktor raised a brow. And how would I do that without your precious Lev noticing? Because you didn't need to, Igor replied. You already had access. Family does. The air thinned. One of the guards shifted uneasily. Viktor's smirk faltered for the first time. You're losing control, Igor. Everyone can see it. You used to be feared. Now they whisper you've gone soft. Over a maid. Natalie froze. Igor's expression didn't change, but the silence that followed felt like a knife being sharpened. He stepped closer, his shadow swallowing Viktor's. You forget, he said softly, what happens to those who whisper too loud. Viktor's smirk returned, but his eyes flickered. You won't kill me. You need me. I built half of this empire with you. No, Igor said. You built half of it for me, and now you'll watch me burn your half down. He nodded to Lev. Get him out of my sight. Strip access. Freeze every account he's touched. Viktor protested, his words turning from arrogance to anger. You can't. I already did. Lev grabbed Viktor by the arm and dragged him toward the door. You're lucky he still believes in blood, Lev muttered. The door slammed. The sound echoed long after he was gone. Igor turned to the window, his reflection fractured by the rain. I built walls, he said, quietly, and filled them with people I thought were bricks. Natalie took a tentative step forward. What now? He turned, eyes dark with resolve. Now we finish this. The storm outside intensified, heavy drops pelting the glass like applause for a tragedy no one wanted to watch. Natalie followed him into the office as he pulled up satellite maps, coordinates, transaction logs. He pointed to a blinking red mark on the screen. Mirov's last transfer went here, a warehouse outside the city. It's where he's keeping the backups and probably the drive. You're going there? She asked. We're going there, he corrected, already holstering his gun. Igor, you can't. He's expecting you. He looked up, one brow raised. That's the point. I should go instead. No. His tone was steel. You've done enough. I need you alive if I fail. The words landed like lead. She stepped closer, forcing him to look at her. Don't talk like that. Like what? Like you're saying goodbye. He didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted his jacket and turned to Lev. Keep her here. If Mirov's men show up, you kill them before they reach the gate. Lev nodded. Understood. Igor looked at Natalie one last time. For a man built of control, the emotion that flickered across his face was disarmingly human. When I return, he said, voice low, this ends, one way or another. And just like that, he was gone. The door shut behind him with a finality that felt like a chapter closing. Natalie stood frozen, staring at the rain-smeared reflection of his taillights disappearing down the long driveway. Lev's voice broke the silence. He always keeps his promises, you know. But she didn't answer, because deep down, she already knew the truth. Men like Igor Bodrov don't walk into storms expecting to return. Hours later, thunder split the night. Natalie sat in the east wing window, watching the city lights flicker through the rain. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every minute stretched longer than the last. The phone on her desk buzzed once, then again. A message. Unknown number. 4 words. He's not coming back. The rain swallowed the rest of the world. Storms don't end in this city. They simply change shape. The rain fractured into mist by morning, but the air still snapped with the kind of electricity that makes birds quiet and men reckless. The first call came from Lev at 0917, 2 words, bitten off through static. Contact, convoy. I was in the East Wing hallway, halfway to Igor's office with a stack of ledgers I'd promised to reconcile. The phone pressed cold against my ear. Where? South approach. Hit and fall. 2 vehicles. He's... A scrape, a burst of gunfire, and then Lev's voice again, steadier. Alive. Repeat. Alive. We're bringing him home. I didn't realize I'd started moving until the papers were on the floor behind me like shed skin. The corridor shortened to a single point, the stairwell down to the main hall. Guards thundered past, boots carving urgency into the marble. The house shifted into the reflexes it knew best. Lockdown, formation, command. I reached the landing and froze, because the second phone rang. Not mine. The security phone mounted near the east entry, the one that rarely rang at all. The guard on duty lifted the receiver. East Wing. A pause. A frown. He turned, met my eyes, and covered the mouthpiece. It's for you. My body knew before my mind did. I took the phone. A man's voice spilled out, calm and smug as brandy. Good morning, Natalie. Mirov. You sound tired. Bad night? He didn't wait for an answer. You've been busy. Investigations, files, moving into new rooms. Congratulations. What do you want? He laughed softly. To return what you lost. The little drive my courier liberated from your drawer. It's delightful. Such tidy numbers. But you made a mistake. What mistake? You hid the truth in a house that believes in lies. A click. Deadline. The guard was already raising the alarm when the first window shattered. They came light and surgical. 3 entry points, synchronized. Service corridor, winter garden doors, east terrace. Not an army, a scalpel. A team sized to steal a single thing. Me. The house responded like a wounded animal, snarling, snapping, closing ranks. The alarm cut into my teeth. I hit the service corridor and grabbed what I could, a radio, a chef's knife, and a length of fabric from a linen cart. Not weapons, not really. But survival begins with what's within reach. East Wing breach, someone barked over the radio. 2 down at the terrace, 3 incoming winter garden. I ducked into the stairwell as a round smacked the wall above my head and pebbled plaster across my cheeks. The sound turned the world into white noise. I swallowed the urge to scream and kept moving. At the next landing, a shadow peeled free from the wall. Broad shoulders, a balaclava, the glint of a gun. He didn't expect me to come toward him, so I did. Fast. The knife went into his forearm before his brain caught up, a clean downward draw like slicing rope. He grunted, dropped the pistol, and I shoved my shoulder into his sternum with every pound of adrenaline I'd been storing for months. He went down cursing. I kicked the gun across the landing, snatched it, and ran. The radio crackled. They want the girl. Lock the east wing. Lev, where the hell are you? 2 minutes out, Lev growled back. Hold the corridor. Copy. I reached the library, tall windows, bookcases like watchmen. 2 men were already inside, glass crunching under their boots. Hands, one ordered, turning toward me. He wasn't expecting me to obey by raising a gun. I fired. The first bullet punched him high in the shoulder, too high. He spun, grabbed the curtain for balance, and brought his rifle up with a howl. I dove behind the center desk as fire chewed the wood where my face had been. Paper flew like frightened birds. I rolled, tasted dust, and fired again, lower, where hitting counts. He went down. The second man swore in Russian and advanced. I slid, grabbed the heavy globe from the side table, and heaved it into his knee. Bone met history with a crack. He toppled. The desk was bleeding ink. So were my palms. My pulse beat in my gums, the soundtrack of a house learning how to kill. I took the hall, skidding on polished floors as the radio snared again. Winter garden clear, terrace neutralized, east corridor, hold, they're pushing the east. I rounded the corner straight into the east corridor and almost collided with 3 of them. Too close, too clean. Their eyes widened. Mine narrowed. I dropped low, slid on my hip, and fired once, twice. One man folded. The second yelled and lunged. I brought the chef's knife up under his wrist, felt it bite, and used his momentum to yank him sideways into his partner. They pinwheeled. I ran through the gap they created, catching my breath in ragged pieces, my heart a drum someone else was playing. "Natalie!" The voice came from the far end of the corridor. "Lev, down!" I obeyed on instinct. Rounds zipped overhead and chewed the wall where my skull had been. Lev's team swept the corridor with cold precision, herding the remaining men back toward the terrace door. "Move! Move!" Lev barked. "Get her behind!" A hand caught the back of my collar and wrenched me into the winter garden. The glass house was a lung full of jungle, palms and vines and the sweet rot of watered soil. The man who dragged me in had me by the throat before I could turn. He pinned me to the support column and grinned. "Finally," he said, "the boss's little secret." My body did what fear-trained bodies do. It tried to shut down. I forced it to listen to me instead. Knee up, weight forward, knife high. He caught my wrist. He was stronger. Most men are. But most men also underestimate the will of someone who came here to die on her own terms. "Call him," he sneered. "Tell Bodrov you're ready to go for a ride." "No," I rasped. "Then I'll tell him for you." He shifted to drag, not pin, which is when I bit him. Not elegant, not cinematic, human. I sank my teeth into the meat of his palm until copper filled my mouth and he yelped. His grip loosened. The knife dropped. So did I. Dead weight, and kicked both legs into the side of his knee. The joint buckled. He swore, swung, and caught me across the cheek hard enough to light the garden white. For a second, I saw nothing but stars. Then a window exploded behind him. The concussion took the air out of the room. Lev's voice raked the doorway. "Down!" I went down. Lev's men surged through the shattered frame and brought the winter garden back under the jurisdiction of men who knew what they were doing. The man who'd grabbed me tried to run. He didn't make it to the door. Silence, fragile and wet, rang in the aftermath. My breath came in stutters. The plants clicked softly, shedding glass. Lev crouched, eyes sweeping my face, the bruise blooming along my cheekbone. "You good?" "I'm vertical," I said, and surprised myself by laughing. It sounded close to crying. He offered a hand. I took it. "We're not done," he said. "Terrace team's reporting." The front doors creaked. We froze. They opened wider with the slow dread of a stage trap door. And then he was there. Igor, blood down his temple, jacket torn, shirt clinging wet to his ribs, a dark stain spreading like winter. He crossed the threshold without theatricality, like men do who've already seen the worst part of a day and kept walking. His eyes found me first. They always had a talent for that. Whatever was left of my composure cracked. He took 3 more steps and stopped in the middle of the great hall. Glass glittered around him like a field of bad diamonds. Lev moved toward him. Igor waved him off without looking away from me. Something inside my chest caved and righted itself. Behind Lev, one of the attackers, the last still breathing, tried to crawl toward the side door. He was the one from the winter garden. The one who'd called me a secret and dragged me by the throat. His hand left a red snail trail across the marble. Igor's gaze shifted. He saw the man. He saw the handprint on my neck. The world narrowed to the width of his pupils. He walked, not fast, deliberate. Each step a sentence. The crawling man rolled to his back and lifted his hands. "Boss," he gasped. "Boss, Igor didn't look at the hands. He looked at me. Then he looked at the bruise on my cheek. The line of his mouth changed, small, the way a coastline changes when a tide decides it's tired of asking. He reached the man, stood over him, and spoke in a voice that didn't need to be louder than the storm. "You touched her." It wasn't shouted. It was delivered. A verdict. The hall held its breath. He drew the pistol, pressed it once against the man's sternum, as if measuring the depth of something, and pulled the trigger. The sound punched the room. Birds exploded from the winter garden trees. Somewhere, a servant stifled a sob. The body went still. Igor didn't glance at the blood. He holstered the gun and swayed. Lev caught his arm. "Hospital." Igor shook him off. "No hospitals. Boss, patch me here." He finally looked at Lev. "And lock this house down to the marrow." Then to me, gentler, quiet enough to be private in a room full of men. "Are you hurt?" I opened my mouth and failed to speak. He nodded once, accepting the answer my body hadn't formed words for. "Upstairs," he said. "Now." He took 2 steps, and his world tilted. Lev and I reached for him at the same time. Between us, we got him onto the stairs and into the office, where the leather sofa accepted his weight like a confession. Lev ripped gauze from a kit and started cleaning the gash along Igor's ribs. Igor barely flinched. His eyes were on me again, cataloging the bruise, the cut lip, the way my hands wouldn't stop trembling. "Breathe," he said. "I am." "Lie better," he murmured, and then let the pain take a little more of him. By nightfall, the city had red meat. Footage leaked. The great hall after the fight, the body on the marble, a still of Igor turning away with blood on his shirt and a woman at his side. Headlines ate themselves to get bigger. Igor Bodrov executes his own men over his maid. Bodrov loses control as mistress becomes trigger. War at the mansion, woman at the center. They got the words wrong. They always would. Because everyone in the underworld knew already. I wasn't a maid. Not anymore. Not in any way that mattered. In rooms where rumor is currency and violence a dialect, a new sentence wrote itself onto the city's wall. Touch what he claims, and you don't get a second chance. I sat at the edge of Igor's desk, watching the monitors, listening to Lev's orders, the endless radio hiss, the heartbeat of a house that had learned my name and chosen not to spit it out. When the door finally eased open and the corridor light framed me, Igor was awake again, stitched, pale, unbent. "You shouldn't be on your feet," I said. He studied me, noted the purple blooming beneath my eye, the bandage on my palm, the way I stood like a building after an earthquake. "And yet," he replied, "here we are." He held my gaze like a promise, not tenderness, not heat. Something older, anchored, unarguable. "Tomorrow," he said, "we end this." Outside, the storm finally gave up pretending and drifted away. Inside, the house settled around a new truth. The war had shifted ground, and so had we. The storm had come back like an old argument. Wind howled across the glass, rain drumming the same rhythm that had played the night she first met him, the night she stood at this very table, cloth in hand, trying to erase the reflection of a life that wasn't hers. Now the table was bare, except for one thing. A flash drive, small and silver, glinting under the chandelier like a bullet waiting for its gun. Natalie stood at one end, Igor at the other. The same distance they'd started with, but it felt smaller now, crowded by all the things they'd survived. She slid the drive across the polished surface. It stopped halfway, perfectly between them. "It's over," she said quietly. "The files are decrypted. Every account, every payment, every bribe. You have the proof, Igor. You can destroy them. You don't need me anymore." The thunder outside swallowed her voice, but not the meaning. Igor's eyes stayed on her for a long time before drifting to the drive. He didn't reach for it. He didn't move at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, but weighted with something that hadn't been there before. "You think that's all I needed? You wanted Anton's empire burned. It's done." He stepped closer, slow, deliberate. "Anton's dead." "I know." "His men are gone. His network's dismantled." "I know that, too." "Then what's left, Natalie?" "You," she whispered. He stopped, inches away, eyes sharp as a blade but soft where they looked at her. "You think I'm the villain who wins when the war ends?" Her throat tightened. "Aren't you?" He smiled faintly, the kind that never reached his eyes. "No, I'm the man who lost the moment I let you in." She didn't know how to answer that, didn't know how to hold both truths in her hands, the man who ordered deaths like logistics, and the man who had stood between her and the barrel of a gun. She turned away, pressing a hand to the table to steady herself. "You're free now," she said. "You can rebuild everything Anton took." "I don't rebuild lies," he murmured. "I bury them." She looked up sharply. "And what am I?" He was in front of her before she could move, his hand closing gently over hers on the table. "The one thing I didn't bury." Her breath caught. The air between them crackled, not just with electricity from the storm, but with everything they hadn't said in all those sleepless nights. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, rattling the glass. Inside, the silence pressed harder. For months, everything she'd done had been for survival. Collecting data, hiding truths, running from the ghost of her father's death. Now, with Anton gone and Igor standing in front of her, she felt something stranger. Peace mixed with fear. He reached for the flash drive and held it up to the light. Anton thought he was clever. He kept backups in 3 countries, offshore accounts, shell fronts. But he made one mistake. What mistake? He thought he could touch what's mine. The words weren't possessive this time. They were protective. And that difference terrified her more than the first time he'd said them. She took a breath. "You exposed yourself for me, Igor. The papers, the leaks, they all say the same thing. You killed your own men over a maid." He let the drive fall to the table with a soft click. "Let them. That's not a denial. It's a correction." His eyes found hers again, dark and unwavering. "They think you're my weakness. They don't understand that you're the reason I still have a heart left to lose." She shook her head. "You can't save me, Igor. You already did." He smiled without mirth. "And you think that's enough?" "I think it has to be." He turned away, pacing toward the window. The reflection of lightning cut across his face like a scar. "When I was young," he said, I thought power meant safety. That if I built walls high enough, no one could hurt what I cared about. She watched him in silence. He looked over his shoulder. But I was wrong. Walls don't protect. They isolate. And then you showed up with your ghosts and your quiet fury, and you tore through every one of them. Her voice trembled. I didn't mean to. He took a step closer. You did it by existing. He was close now, close enough that she could see the faint line of the scar near his collarbone, the reminder of the ambush he'd walked away from. His eyes dropped to her bruised cheek, the one from the fight, and something in his expression softened, almost painfully. You survived me, Natalie. That's what saves me. She swallowed hard, blinking away the tears that betrayed her calm. Then what happens now? Igor's jaw flexed. Now the city learns what it means to lose everything for the right reason. Sirens wailed in the distance, low and mournful, carried by the wind. Police, journalists, rivals, they were all converging on the mansion like vultures smelling smoke. Natalie's chest tightened. They're coming. I know. You could still run. So could you. I'm not. He smiled again, a rare, fragile thing. Then neither am I. Thunder shook the windows. The rain thickened until the world outside was nothing but silver noise. Igor walked around the table slowly until he was standing directly in front of her. You once told me truth doesn't belong to anyone, he said. I still believe that. He reached out, tracing the edge of the flash drive with one finger. Then let's give it back to the world. He pressed a button on the drive, connecting it to the system behind the desk. Screens around the room lit up one by one. Bank statements, offshore transfers, Anton's personal correspondence, the names of every official he'd bribed. It was all there. Proof. And with a final command, Igor uploaded it all to the open network. Natalie watched as decades of corruption unraveled on the screens, spilling into the digital void for anyone to see. No cover-ups, no secrecy, just truth, raw and irreversible. When it was done, the lights dimmed again. The only sound left was rain and breathing. She turned to him. You just burned your empire. No, he said softly. I burned the rot. He looked almost peaceful now, as if confessing to something he'd been waiting his whole life to admit. The sirens grew louder, closer. Flashing blue light began to paint the ceiling. Natalie's pulse raced. They'll arrest you. Maybe. He stepped closer. But they'll remember what we did. She didn't move. Couldn't. Her body was caught somewhere between fight and surrender, between logic and something much heavier. You think you've lost everything, he said, voice barely above the rain. But you haven't lost me. I never had you, she whispered. He tilted his head, eyes glinting, with that dangerous calm she first saw in him months ago. Then take me now. His hand lifted, slow, uncertain, giving her room to pull away. She didn't. He touched her face, the gesture careful, reverent, as if afraid that she might vanish under his fingertips. The world outside howled. Inside, time stopped. They think you're mine, he said softly. Her answer came as a whisper against his chest. Let them. He kissed her, not hungry, not violent, but final. A declaration and a goodbye folded into one breath. Outside, sirens cut through the storm. Inside, thunder rolled across the ceiling, echoing through the same hall where it had all begun. The camera would linger here, if this were a film. The long table, the blood-stained floor beneath it, the flash drive flickering beside a man and woman who'd burned an empire to keep the truth alive. And when the lights from the approaching cars finally bled through the rain, they didn't move. because for once, neither of them had anything left to hide. Freedom doesn't always come from the light. Sometimes it walks out of the shadows and offers you a hand instead of a chain. She started as his maid, but after that night, the whole city whispered her name. Not as a servant, but as the woman he'd burned the world for. If this story moved your heart, like and subscribe for more, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Love knows no distance.